Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Streamed and Screened, an entertainment podcast about movies and TV from Lee Enterprises. I'm Terry Lipshetz, a senior producer at Lee and co-host of the program with Bruce Miller, editor of the Sioux City Journal and a longtime entertainment reporter. 'Tis the season, Bruce. 'Tis the award season.
Do you feel like you're kind of in the midst of it now? I mean, you've been with me now more than a month.
Right.
And say, yeah, I kind of feel I get this. I get what award season's all about.
Yeah, it's exciting times. I mean, we've got, it's all in the news. People are talking about who's the best picture going to be, the best actors, surprises, things to watch. I still got to double down and really get watching. I've probably about halfway through the best picture nominees. I think I've seen 4 or 5 of them, so I've still got a little work to do on those to get caught up.
We've got to get this done. With this can't hold. We've got to have it all ready for that night. Do you ever do like I do, where you have the ballot and you mark it off, and then at the night of the Oscars, you watch to see how well you did?
Yeah, I haven't done that in a few years. I used to do it pretty religiously because in my single pre-family days, I would see every movie and just take notes and be ready to go on every single movie. And I knew a lot of even some of the dark horse movies and some of the lesser knowns. I'm at that point now, Bruce, where I'm just lucky if I can stay awake at night to catch 30 minutes of TV.
You probably get all of the best animated film nominees because the kids have to see those, right?
I can usually be a pretty solid source on which Disney Pixar movie delivered and did not. Although now the kids are almost 12, Bruce, so we're kind of moving out of that. Yeah, we're moving.
Have you been to Ant-Man yet?
No.
Okay, get ready. I was very disappointed in Quantumania because I was expecting it to be a little funnier than it was, because Ant-Man is the guy who brings the humor. You know, he's kind of like really not as into it as the others, and he can do goofy things. Not unlike Thor, but Thor they kind of repurposed. But Ant-Man, he has one good laugh at the beginning, and then it gets deadly serious because they kidnap his daughter and they want him to get something for them so that they'll let her go. And it's like, really? This is too much. Plus, they've been using this new technique where basically actors are performing in front of a big TV screen, and then they film that. And it looks flat, I think. So Ant-Man and the Wasp, come on, see how much she's in it. She's hardly in it. Her mother is in it more than she is.
Really?
Yeah, and they introduced Kang, who's an interesting character who will be back and apparently has something to do with the whole Marvel universe going forward. So it was one of those things where I was more interested in the heat warmers on my seats than I was in the movie.
Is Ant-Man, because I'm not a huge comic book movie person, but I did see Deadpool. So is the kind of the humor of Ant-Man similar, not as grisly?
As snarky. He's not as snarky as Deadpool, who I love, because he just, look at this, get this. But he is funny. Like one of the scenes, and a spoiler, I'm just putting it out there, is that they confuse him with Spider-Man. And it's like, oh, thanks a lot. So that's kind of cute. And Paul Rudd is good at humor, but he's always been seen as kind of a second-tier superhero. And then now to try and kind of up him a little bit, I don't know. It didn't work for me. So Quantumania, yeah.
All right. Well, you really have to sell me hard on the comic book movie to get me to go. So you're not getting me there right now.
The Flash is the one that, they doubled down because Ezra Miller was in some kind of some trouble.
Yes.
And they thought, are we going to just ditch the film? What are we going to do? And they are coming out full guns a-blazing on this one, and they're standing by Ezra, so it must be a good film, and that's coming out, and that'll be an interesting one to see what happens.
And I'm curious on that one too, because you're bringing back arguably one of the best Batmans of all time in Michael Keaton.
Yeah, that'll be fun to see.
Right.
So they probably spent too much money. They can't ditch it,
No.
And they don't have a place to stick it somewhere where you say, well, we'll just burn this one off on this because we spent too much money.
Kind of, moving back to to award season.
This is a big time. This last week, BAFTAs, which are usually after the Oscars or very close to the Oscars, has jumped the gun kind of so that they don't look like they're just mimicking what the Oscars are. And they had a wild bunch of different nominees. Something like Fabelmans, for example, didn't get much in the nominations.
I noticed that.
All Quiet on the Western Front got a lot, and it won a lot. I think it won 7. And including Best Picture. Now, it's nominated in the Oscars too, but I don't think it'll show that well in the US. It'll get maybe international film, but I don't know that it'll win Best Picture.
I saw All Quiet. It was one that I watched a few months ago because it's on Netflix and it's a Netflix movie. And I like watching kind of those period war pieces, World War I, World War II. So I was intrigued. I never saw the original, so I don't have a point of comparison. I liked the movie. I thought it was it had that good message of anti-war message, right? It's like there's the horrors of war and we're going to show you the horrors of war. But it was a little bit sluggish, 2 hours and change, I think it was. And it was a hard watch after a while.
Yeah, it was not one that I was invested in. So I don't know that it'll win. I don't know that it has that quality.
Do you think with that one at all, it could pick up steam just as kind of, sometimes it seems like with the award season, there's more than just handing out awards. There's maybe picking up a message, some sort of theme of like what's going on. And the fact that we have the Russia-Ukraine war right now, that it might pick up steam because it's an anti-war message at a time when we're on the brink.
I don't think it will. I think, this was going to be the year of the woman. And that's why we had women talking. She said, Tar. Those are all kind of stronger messages to sell. And I think people have kind of war fatigue, if you will. And they're not that interested in that. Now, we could see at the Screen Actors Guild, the award that you have to look at there for potential Best Picture is Best Performance by an Ensemble. And last year, I think Coda won, and that was like, really? Coda's winning? We can't have that. And it won the Oscar. So this could be a bellwether, and that's because there are more actors in the Oscar voting than there are in any other discipline or area. So they do have a lot of clout. And in the Best Picture, it's kind of, they throw them all in. And if you figure, well, I've got more of these people voting for Best Picture, that's a likely bellwether. But I don't know that this year's Screen Actors Guild will show that. I don't believe All Quiet was nominated for Best Ensemble. So it's going to be, I think it'll be a surprise this year, a big surprise. But if you look at actor and actress and supporting, that this one could be a very good indication of who will win.
Best actress and actor, who do you think? I mean, because we saw in the BAFTAs, we saw Austin Butler for Elvis win.
And I think he's gaining momentum. If you watch the ads for Elvis now, it all says, for your consideration, Austin Butler. They're not saying for your consideration Best Picture, even though it's nominated for Best Picture. They are really pushing Austin. And I think they figure that's their best chance of winning. He is leading in some of the, where they predict. Gold Derby likes to predict. And that could be an indication, but you know what? They like to surprise too. And I wouldn't be surprised if Brendan Fraser wins it, because that's a good story. He was a huge star. He was Tom Cruise level. And then a lot of things happened and he disappeared. And this brings him back in a big way. It's a good acting exercise. I mean, when you see him playing this guy and you think, wow, this is good stuff. It would be a way of saying we still have a quality level. We're not just suckers for anybody who plays a musician or a singer, because how many of those have been out there? And Chadwick Boseman played one, and he didn't even get nominated. And Chadwick Boseman is great. So I think after they gave Rami Malek the one for Bohemian Rhapsody, they said, let's kind of put the brakes on this a little bit. So that's what I think would be against Austin Butler. But I think it's those two. Austin Butler and Brendan Fraser are the two. If there's a sneaker in there somewhere, it's going to be a real surprise. I liked Colin Farrell a lot, but I don't think he has enough momentum. And Bill Nighy, that would be like we're rewarding somebody who's old. And Paul Mescal, who was in After Sun, people know him more for the Hulu series he did, more so than for this. So I think it's down to those two guys. It's either Austin or it's Brendan.
Yeah, I have not seen The Whale yet. That was one where my wife and I actually were talking about going to see it, but it seemed to kind of move in and out of the theaters really quickly. And a lot of those types of movies tend to do that. So
I think it's streaming, though. I think you could see it somewhere.
Yeah, I think we're going to try to sneak that one in as soon as possible. I did see Elvis. It was not my favorite movie of all time by any stretch of the imagination.
Why?
Well, I mean, and we're obviously the audience doesn't have the benefit of seeing us, but I'm surrounded by music. I'm a huge music fan. I listen to a lot of music, CDs, vinyl, the whole thing. So anytime there is a music kind of biopic, I want to see it. So, The Doors, I was all over that one. I saw Bohemian Rhapsody. Those to me are really some of the best movies in the genre. I mean, there's others that I prefer too, like, and that tend to be a little bit more on the documentary side of things, like, the one that looks at the Sugar Man, that looked at that Rodriguez, right? The musician who is going to be the next Dylan. It won an Oscar, and he was a construction worker in Detroit for years. So I really like watching those kind of reality type ones. But Elvis isn't my favorite musician of all time, for one thing. So it's kind of like already a little bit behind. I thought HBO did a really good documentary on Elvis a few years ago called The Searcher, which I think really did a good job at looking at Elvis as the person. I felt that this movie was skimmed over his life just way too quickly in the 2+ hours, however long it was. And it turned more into, this isn't a movie about Austin Butler as Elvis. This is Tom Hanks playing Colonel Parker. And I don't want to go see a movie about Colonel Parker. I mean, maybe a lot of people don't know about Colonel Parker and the type of person he was and what he did to, really, in my mind, like he took Elvis to the next level, but also really held him back. He never let the man tour in Europe and become a worldwide star that he could have been, for basically selfish reasons. But the movie became like, this is a Tom Hanks movie. And I really went into this hoping to see an Elvis movie.
Well, and I think it becomes best Elvis impersonator, not necessarily best Elvis, because look how many actors have played Elvis. I mean, Kurt Russell, you could throw them all out there. And I don't know that he gets things right. He gets the voice right. He gets like that kind of sneer that Elvis had, but Elvis was never that thin. Elvis was never that kind of brooding naturally. Elvis was more outgoing, more friendly. Than this kid always looked like it was like he'd been tortured to do music. Elvis loved doing music. He came alive on stage. And I don't know that you see that. Yes, you get those good scenes. The Leather Elvis one, you get the ones where he's, doing the Vegas shows. Those are all good. But then I get into the point where it's revisionist history at the end. I don't like that. And so I'm not all that sold on it. I love the look of it. I love the costumes and the sets. I thought that was real cool. But it ends there. And I don't think this kid should get enough just by being nominated. He's worked it like nobody's business. I still think Brendan Fraser should win. You mentioned Tom Hanks. This made me so mad because Tom Hanks is not that kind of jerk that he plays in this. Not like that at all. I have known or interviewed Tom ever since the days of Bosom Buddies. So I know a different Tom Hanks than most people do. And he's been very friendly. And he, to be honest, actors don't really form friendships with reporters. That doesn't happen. That isn't a thing, even though they may want you to believe that, oh, we're real good friends. No, I can't name a single person, even though they might recognize me or they might remember who I was when I did a story on them. But the friendship thing is not there. But I did have a moment where I asked Tom Hanks if he would do something for me. I had a friend who was turning 60, and I said, Tom, she thinks you are the best thing ever. Would you just do me a favor and just send her a card that says, happy birthday? Oh, sure, I can do that. That's no problem. Well, he said, tell me a little bit about her. And I told him, some background on her. And he wrote, and you know how if you know anything about Tom Hanks, he has this series of old-fashioned typewriters that he loves, old-fashioned typewriters, and he types notes on them a lot. He wrote a full-page letter to her that talked about how great she was, and this was during the pandemic, and how she had helped others, and that he just wanted to wish her a happy birthday. And I thought, this is so incredible. And I thought he would send a card that just says happy birthday in his name, right? This was like he had done homework. And he sent this thing typed out, and then he sent me a note, and he said, I sent it. Did she get it? Let me know if she got it. And she called me up and she says, you won't believe what I got in the mail, and I'm sure you had something to do with it. I got a letter from Tom Hanks. And I said, well, what did he say? So, and it was very detailed. She has the letter framed. It's like one of those prized possessions that you've got in your life. And he was kind enough to do something like that. And I find that and he does that all the time. And I'm not saying go ahead and do it, because this is not, I'm not trying to encourage somebody to call Tom and say, oh, well, you did it before, do it again. No, it's one of those things that just rarely happens, but it hit the right kind of vibe. And for somebody like that, who really did like Tom Hanks, I get a lot of people who say, oh, give me an autograph from so-and-so. And it's like, well, what's your connection? Why do you want this autograph? Because I'll try something. Tara, if you ever have somebody that you say, this is my one star, I will try to get you that. But I won't do it for everybody that you say, oh, yeah, give me an autograph on that one. Yeah. I'm not an autograph hunter. That's not what it is. But if it does mean something to somebody, I'm all there for it, because I think it works. And this was perfect. This was absolutely perfect for her.
That's wonderful. That's such a great story. We were talking offline about this, and I wasn't joking. Like, Tom Hanks to me is a bit of a national treasure when it comes to actors. I mean, he's done so many great movies, Forrest Gump and Philadelphia, whether it's a super drama or it's a buddy comedy, they're great. And you love him, and I wanted to love him in Elvis, but I couldn't.
And they could have had so many other actors play that role. There are a lot of ones of that girth that could have played Colonel Parker. And then they had to kind of pad up Tom and make him look like, yeah, I get that it helps sell because you have an unknown playing Elvis. But there are some of those good character actors that easily could have filled that role and been better than Tom.
Absolutely. I can't agree more. Best actress, any thoughts on that? I mean, Cate Blanchett won.
It's down to the two. It's down to two again. Michelle Yeoh and Cate Blanchett. And, here's where we're rewarding for a lifetime of, commitment to the art of acting, or are we giving somebody who really did give the best performance? And if you ask me, the best performance was given by Cate Blanchett. That is just a master class in all the nuance. And as somebody that you really hate, you hate her because she's like anybody that you haven't liked in your own life. You might have had a boss that you thought was a real jerk and was just trying to be mean for being mean. And she captures all of that little nuance. And then you see she gets hers. And it's like, now what's going to happen with this? So I think it's an acting a huge acting achievement, even though she has 2 Oscars already. This would be her 3rd. It would put her in that same class as Ingrid Bergman, Katharine Hepburn, Meryl Streep, and most recently Frances McDormand. But she's worthy of it. She should get 3 Oscars at some point. Now we go to Michelle Yeoh, who does everything and then some in Everything Everywhere All at Once. She does her martial arts that we've known her for. She plays funny comedy bits. She plays deep drama. There's a lot there. And it could be just, if they're going to go all in on Everything Everywhere, she's swept up in it. So this is one we'll see at the Screen Actors Guild Awards, if Michelle wins or if Kate wins. And I think either or would be the one that probably is going to be the leading contender for the Oscar.
I haven't had a chance to see Everything Everywhere yet. Sometimes, and it seems like every year there's one movie that catches lightning on a bottle, gets a dozen nominations, but then at the end comes away with almost nothing. Do you think that could be one of those types of movies, or do you think it's going to get something?
No, I think it's headed to win. And the other thing you'll see is that all those 10 movies that you have not all seen, will get something. They'll find a way to sort that all out. So you'll look at All Quiet on the Western Front, international film. We got you taken care of. Goodbye. If we give Elvis, if it goes for the costumes, or it could be Austin Butler, done with you. You're out of there. Fabelmans, there could be the score for John Williams. Get him out of there. Done. We won't give Steven Spielberg the director prize. We'll think there's another one waiting in the wings for him, although he could win. The Banshees of Inisherin, that'll get best screenplay. Okay, does it get something more? It could. So it's all that, but everything, when you start checking them off, Avatar, it'll get special effects. So we're not going to see a sweep that it's going to be 10 Oscars. Those days are done. I don't think we're ever going to see 10 Oscars for anything unless there are no films, and there's just one that's released. But Everything Everywhere could get 5 or 6 at the most. More likely it'll get 4.
Okay.
And it could be Michelle Yeoh in that whole mix. I did talk to Ke Huy Quan,
yeah,
and I don't know if you can put a link in this, but I did talk to him for this week about this whole concept of coming back after 30 some years, and very fascinating. And you'll get to see how he feels and how kind of tickled he is to be the chosen one now this year. He's making the most of it. He went to the BAFTAs, had a great time, did not win, but didn't matter because he was getting to see everybody and be part of that community that he never thought he would.
Yeah, for those that don't know the backstory, Ke Huy Quan was he played Short Round in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. So he played opposite of with Harrison Ford, and then he also had a starring role in The Goonies as Data, and that was kind of it. That was like the high watermark for him as an actor. Yeah, and so all of a sudden his name popped back out there when the buzz of this movie came, and they started talking about him, and it's really his first big movie since like Indiana Jones and The Goonies. And actually his lawyer who negotiated his contract for this movie played Chunk in The Goonies. It was Jeff Cohn, I believe his name. So you talked recently with him, and can you share a little bit of insight? What did you talk about? What's he up to? Yeah,
we talked about the idea that he's been working behind the camera. He's been involved in technical things. I think he did choreography for some of the shows because he's a great martial artist. He went to USC and got a degree in film, and so he's done. It isn't like he suddenly pulled out of the trash heap and here he is, he's an actor. It isn't like that at all. He's been in the business and didn't really know if he wanted to go back to acting, and it happened through a tweet that they just kind of, what about this guy? This guy could play the role. They couldn't find somebody to play Michelle Yeoh's husband. And so they just kind of, would you be interested in auditioning? And he did. He seemed to be right for the role. and it was like magic. It worked, and he's back in the whole thing. He is in a new series with Michelle Yeoh called American Born Chinese, and that'll be coming out on Disney Plus. I'm sure they're going to make sure they can, capitalize on this, but they're filming it now. It's based on a graphic novel, and it's about a kid going to a school where he's the only Asian American kid in the school, and how he tries to fit in, and he calls on these various people. Well, Quan plays a TV star of the era of the 80s and 90s, who's very stereotypical. I don't know if I'm saying the right words here, but it's one of those ones where you go, what? And he was freaked. He said, if I agree to do this part, you've got to promise me that you'll hire me for something else, because I don't want to ruin my career just because I'm playing this kind of stereotypical part. And they said, oh, don't worry, it's going to be great. You're going to love it. So he's one of these ones that the kid has to relate to. Michelle Yeoh plays a goddess that he also gets kind of power from her, a Chinese goddess. So all of this comes together and helps this kid make decisions in his own life. But that thing is so far in the future. That's what they're working on right now. They're filming those scenes and going from there. But he's been, just how excited can you get? It'd be like you or me getting to go to the Oscars and be a nominee. I mean, it's like unreal. The dream you gave up on, and now it's happening, and he could win.
Do you think, he was out of that aspect of the business for so long, but now all of a sudden he's back and the spotlight's on him. Do you see him maybe coming back in some degree now, where he's going to be a regular? Did he talk about any plans? What is he thinking?
He will definitely get lots of work. And it's because he's so versatile. If you see the film, you'll notice that he can play kind of a nerd. He plays a kind of a James Bondish quality kind of guy. All this and everything everywhere. He's a martial artist. He's a kind of a schlumpy dad with a fanny pack. It's although he does a lot. It's like a master audition for all other parts that there could be. And because they're more open now to Asians in leading roles in Hollywood, he thinks it's a good opportunity. He said Michelle Yeoh was his role model. He looked at her, and when she made Crazy Rich Asians, he said, it's possible for me. I can come back. And he said it has changed. The world is much different now than it was when he was first in it. He said, there were no parts. You try, I got 2 and then nothing, because there weren't any. They weren't thinking of colorblind casting. They weren't writing for anybody who was Asian. So it was a real, what do? You are kind of stuck in, I better go back to school.
Yeah.
So there he is. But I think it's a great story. It's one of those ones that you look and you say, yep, I'm glad he's in it. And I really want him to win.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned Crazy Rich Asians. That was such a fun movie. My wife and I loved it. And it was a real good opportunity to open up the door for Asian actors, Asian American actors. And it was a fun, I just want to see good movies. I don't care who's in
and
it.
Then look at Parasite. Right. How great that was. And, you think past that, you think, well, we don't have to recast this with all Caucasian actors. Why not do these stories? And these stories are very fascinating. And Crazy Rich Asians, I think at some point you must have thought, wait a minute, I'm not thinking about them being Asian. I think they're just characters.
Yep.
And that's what Hollywood has to do, is start thinking in terms of characters. Now, sometimes it doesn't make sense, but if there's an opportunity, why not take it? Do it.
Kind of getting back to Quan though for a moment, and obviously one of his biggest roles was Indiana Jones. Do you think, because I've heard rumors he's going to be in this 5th one, this new one?
No, that's one of those little secret surprises. And here's the connection, okay? Disney is doing this show, right?
Right.
Disney has a relationship with Indiana Jones.
Correct.
They have him at their theme parks. There has been talk. Come on. And they've been teasing things. even if it's just one where he's like in the street and they look at each other like they recognize each other, you know they're going to take advantage of it. You know that's going to happen. And if he wins the Oscar, they have to. They have to.
You have to. And that's going to be a moment where, and I'm going to go see Indiana Jones in the theater. When he shows up, you're going to get applause from the audience. People will love it. Short Round's back.
That people need that, you know, or he'll be like somebody who's trying to sell off his popularity. Short rounds, short ribs, or whatever, something like that. And it'll be a visual thing that you go, oh, that's funny. I understand what they're talking about.
We've been watching a couple things here and there. I've been watching with my daughter The Bad Batch on Disney Plus, so we're kind of gearing up, with that show. But we're going to be moving into The Mandalorian season 3, which is coming up in basically a week or so now. So looking forward to that.
Do you think there are too many Star Wars things? Do you say they need to pull back?
They're pacing it at a good way. They'll do The Mandalorian. Then there'll be a little bit of a break, and then it looks like the Ahsoka Tano show with Rosario Dawson will come out probably in the fall. That's the rumor I read this morning, actually. So I think the fact that they're doing something roughly, once a quarter or once every couple of quarters, but they're also mixing them up. So it's not the same show. We're not getting like Mandalorian every single year. We're getting it like every year and a half or so. So I think they're pacing them out. And it's also, as a Star Wars fan, I was a kid when these movies came out, and then there was nothing forever. So now, the floodgates have kind of reopened. I think the main thing is that they're doing good stories, because as much as we can love George Lucas, his storytelling with some of the movies wasn't great. Yeah. And then when Disney redid the 3
part 1,
when Disney took over and rebooted the 3 movies, they weren't spectacular. But I think they've got a really good mix right now with Dave Filoni, who was handpicked by George Lucas to do his animation. So he did the Clone Wars, which was amazing, and he did Star Wars Rebels, which was amazing. But now they've put him in charge of the live action TV shows, and they've taken Jon Favreau, who is a Star Wars fanboy. He's somebody who's like roughly my age, who grew up with Star Wars and has a great respect for George Lucas and the original storytelling. So he's not going to just do something to get, fans in the seats. He's also doing something to, as a Star Wars fan, he knows how Star Wars fans think. So he's between Filoni and Favreau. Those two can't do anything wrong with Star Wars, in my opinion, right now. Let them just keep doing it. And once there's a dud, then, we'll ask him to slow down. But
what about Rian Johnson, though? Do you think he helped them at all, or do you think he didn't?
I don't know if the problem was Rian Johnson or J.J. Abrams. The problem that I had with that middle installment of the movie that he did was you had J.J. Abrams rebooted it, then it went to Rian Johnson, and then it went back to J.J. Abrams when things were kind of not working out well. My assumption when they went into this is they had a story arc already set. We're going to do movie A, movie B, movie C, and it's all going to tie up. The more I read into it, they didn't do that. J.J. Abrams did a story, and then they handed it off to Rian Johnson, who did a story. You're doing a trilogy. You have to go into the first movie knowing how the third movie is going to end. And you watch it, and they feel like 3 separate movies that are completely incohesive. They weren't. I don't think Rian Johnson's movie was necessarily terrible. I just think he was handed, they're like, go do it, and he did it, and it just didn't work.
Sure. What would you think of a Quentin Tarantino star?
Well, he's been tied. Wasn't he tied more to Star Trek than
right?
He was, yeah.
Could you see him doing this, or is that way too far?
That's too far. I unless, and I don't know Tarantino if he's got ties to Star Wars in any way, like as a fan or anything. As I said, this is why I love Jon Favreau in that role, because he's a really good filmmaker, but he's a Star Wars fan. So he's bringing those two pieces together.
And look at him, though, as the Marvel man. he's like really helping the Marvel universe become something.
Yeah.
So, fascinating. But, I always wonder if they had distinctive directors who did their kind of take on things, like the Coen brothers. If the Coen brothers did Star Wars, what would that be like? I would love to see that. And I think sometimes they get a little too TV centric, where it's like, we've got to stay in these barriers. We've got to have these are boundaries. You can't go out this. Why not?
Yeah, the one thing though, and Star Wars sort of went down that way with when they were going to do the Han Solo movie, and they gave it to Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who did the Lego movie, and then they had to bring in Ron Howard at the end to bail him out because something was not going well with it. And I liked the Han Solo movie. I didn't think it was awful by any means, but I don't know what those two were doing, if they were just trying to do too much of a Lego movie in the Star Wars universe and it just fell apart. But I think that's the danger when you start going down that route of allowing like a Coen Brothers or a Tarantino or that kind of thing. We've already sort of seen it with the Lego movie and it didn't work.
Okay.
So what have you been watching, Bruce?
Well, I did watch all of The History of the World Part 2, which will be coming March 6th. Is that it? 5th, 6th? On Hulu. And what happened was some real big fans of Mel Brooks decided they wanted to do something with him. Is there something we can reboot? Is there something we can remake? Is there something, whatever? And he said, well, there's History of the World Part 1. There should be a Part 2. But they were surprised that he wanted to be such a part of it. He wanted to sit in the writer's room every day. So even though it was done by Zoom, they said he was all ready for everything. He was dressed in a sport coat and a white shirt, and he was ready to pitch things to them. They said he was very, very involved, even though you would think at 90-something, he wouldn't want to be. Well, and when you look at it, there is definitely a Mel Brooks feel to the way it's put together, but it's basically a handful of stories separated out where you get a little scene in each episode. So it's not like if you put it together, like there's one where they do a Larry David spoof. And I don't want to tell you too much more because you'll know what I'm talking about if I tell you. And then they have Shirley Chisholm as a character in another one. And I think some of these things you need to have a little background to understand it. But the sensibility where it's kind of slapsticky humor and stuff, it works. Nick Kroll is very much in that field of I'll do whatever it takes for a laugh. And he plays a number of those characters where, okay. You have Johnny Knoxville as Rasputin. You've got Wanda Sykes is in a couple of different ones, but she does play Shirley Chisholm. Ike Barinholtz is in a Civil War one. So it's different characters. And then there's some guest ones. And those are kind of fun to see because you go, oh, Jack Black is in this. And he's just in it very shortly. But you get a chance to see all that. And at the end, you think, it's kind of like a Mel Brooks movie, because Mel Brooks movies were never overwhelmingly funny where you go, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever seen. He'll never equal this again. They were often mildly funny. And you said, well, that's okay. I enjoyed it. But that's the series.
Yeah, I always thought that with Mel Brooks. I've seen most Mel Brooks movies. I was trying to think to myself if I actually saw the original. But, I go back to like Blazing Saddles, where I remember before I watched it for the first time, everyone's like, oh, that is like the funniest movie you're ever going to see. And I watched it, and it's a funny movie, and it's a good movie, but it's not the funniest movie I've ever seen.
No, I think that one peters out in the end, and they really search for an ending for that. Now, Young Frankenstein, I think, was a stronger film because they were mimicking something, and it had a beginning, middle, and an end. And so that worked better. And then he did it in black and white, which even made it, one more step. But he had that great rep company that, oh my God, Cloris Leachman and Gene Wilder, and you just name them. They were in so many of these things.
Dom DeLuise, right? Wasn't he
Dom
in a bunch?
DeLuise,
Yeah.
Madeline Kahn, all of them were just so fun to watch. It was like he had his own television show, and it's your show of shows done on a big screen.
When you told me in advance that you had watched the show, I went ahead and watched a trailer on this, and it looks interesting, and I think I'm going to check it out. But it did feel like a Mel Brooks, because it's almost, he didn't have his normal cast of characters that he had in the 70s, but it's still that ensemble where you do have your Jack Black or your Sarah Silverman, your Danny DeVito makes an appearance. It's all of these people, Seth Rogen. They all get their little moment, kind of like you would see, even going back to like a Spaceballs, where it's
right, just
a little bit of everybody is in it. And I looked at it like, oh yeah, if you didn't tell me it was a Mel Brooks movie or show, I would have been like, oh, I guess Mel Brooks is back, because that's what it felt like to me.
And that some of those people probably worked a day. That's all. They didn't have to work more than that. They put the costume on, they say a couple of lines, they're good. The kind of the triumvirate was Nick Kroll, Ike Barinholtz, and Wanda Sykes. They are good friends, and they were the ones who kind of figured out, how are we going to do this? How are we going to split this up? How are we going to make this interesting for everybody? And that's why you'll see more of them in the film or in the series than you would in any other kind of project. But I laughed. I will tell you, though, they do use words that Mel Brooks never used in his films. So they go there for the ultimate 4-letter word is in there. Okay. And just if you have the kids around, just know this is not like watching some lesser Mel Brooks.
Very good to know. Thank you for the disclaimer on that. So as we're about to wrap up here, giving the audience just a little bit of a sneak peek of what's to come, I think we're going to end up taking like a slight delay between this episode and our next episode, because you sent me an interview that we're going to use in our next episode, but there's an embargo on it. So instead of doing another show next Thursday, we might record next Thursday, but we'll hold it until the start of the next week.
Great.
Can you give us a little sneak peek of what that's about?
That's a new film called Champion, starring Woody Harrelson. It's based on a Spanish film about a coach who really loses his luster, and then he's kind of assigned to coach a rec league. It's a rec league of disabled athletes, and he needs to somehow learn a lesson, and they become champions. It's directed by Bobby Farrelly, who directed Woody in Kingpins, and they wanted to work together. They were friends. His brother was a roommate of Woody Harrelson's for a long time. And they decided, let's do this. Well, the brother normally the Farrelly brothers work together.
Right.
And they couldn't do it on this one because the brother, who, by the way, won a couple of Oscars for a little thing called Green Book, was busy with another project. So Bobby did it all by himself. And he said it was like having Woody as his co-director, because Woody was so good. But you'll get to hear that next week. Champions is the name of the film. And I thought it was very sweet. It's very, it's something that you kind of want to see now. I'm looking for something that's low key. You learn a little something. And Woody, it's a different Woody than you've ever seen. So that's coming up. We'll talk about that. And I think we'll have then our big preview to the Oscars, right? We'll talk about what we're thinking is going to be Best Picture.
That sounds good. Yeah, because that is sneaking up on us really, really quick. So we'll be coming back with that in just over a week. So we'll thank you for listening to this show. And again, we'll have a link to your interview in the show notes.
You know what? This is a great time. That's why I got so mad at going to see Ant-Man, is because this is a great time for movies. There's a lot out there that you may have just ignored or passed over. If you haven't seen After Sun, a great film, Living, a great film. These are things that, where are you finding these? Well, they're all somewhere on streaming. Go look at a list of Oscar nominees. Just do. And you look down below and you'll say, well, that's one I've never heard of. Let's look at that. And if it got this far, it's got to be something worth looking at. So please dig into those lists, see where you are, and start checking them out, because when that night comes, we're making our list and checking it twice. Next week, I'll tell you what it's like to go to the Oscars because I've been there before.
Sounds good. And as always,
see something good, stream something good. Have a great week.